It was just before dawn when explosions lit up the skies over Kyiv, Kharkov, and Mariupol. Columns of Russian tanks rumbled across the border, and the sound of air raid sirens filled the cold winter air. Russia had launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, a move that would shake the world and ignite Europe's largest war in generations. Before we get started, do us a favor and hit that like button so you can be part of our journey. In 1991, the mighty edifice of the Soviet Union crumbled, giving birth to 15 independent republics. Ukraine found itself at the crossroads of two distinct futures. One path beckoned towards the West, promising integration with the European Union and NATO, an enticing prospect that resonated with many Ukrainians. Yet another segment of society felt a stronger connection to their eastern neighbor, Russia, with whom they shared deep historical, cultural, and linguistic ties. As the 21st century dawned, the divide between these two visions seemed to widen. Every public policy decision concerning foreign partnerships, economic integration, or security alliances became a battleground for competing narratives, each side passionately advocating for the future they envisioned for their homeland. But Ukraine's aspirations for closer ties with the EU faced a formidable opponent in Russia, which viewed Ukraine as an integral part of its own historical territory and sphere of influence. This tension escalated dramatically in November 2013 when Ukraine's Russian President Viktor Yanukovych stunned many by rejecting a landmark trade deal with the European Union. The announcement sent shockwaves across the nation and ignited mass protests. Tens of thousands poured into Kyiv's Maidan Square, determined to express their discontent and demand a reversal of this pivotal decision. In the face of unrelenting pressure and amid fears that his authority was slipping away, Viktor Yanukovych abandoned the agreement. What followed were months of heated demonstrations that tested the very foundations of Ukraine's political landscape. Meanwhile, Russia, sensing an opportunity to exert its influence in Ukraine, capitalized on the turmoil. And in March 2014, it orchestrated a swift and controversial move. Unmarked troops, known as Little Green Men, seized strategic sites in Crimea, the Crimean Peninsula. Amid growing international condemnation, a hastily organized referendum was held. Crimea voted overwhelmingly to break away from Ukraine and rejoin Russia. In a move that drew sharp rebukes from the international community, Putin swiftly signed a treaty formally annexing the region. This bold maneuver not only underscored Russia's determination to maintain its relevance in Ukraine's affairs, but also served as a stark reminder of its willingness to use force in pursuit of its geopolitical objectives. However, the unrest didn't end with Crimea. The nation's territorial integrity was under siege as pro-Russian. Separatists backed by Moscow proclaimed independence in two breakaway regions, the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic. What ensued was a protracted and devastating conflict that came to be known as the War in Donbass. For nearly 8 years, the region descended into chaos. Intense urban combat left cities in ruins, and countless lives were lost. Despite numerous ceasefire agreements aimed at bringing a semblance of calm, hostilities continued unabated. The situation grew increasingly complex, with both sides accusing each other of ceasefire violations and employing a range of military tactics from artillery, bombardments, to small unit infantry assaults. As the war in Donbass raged, Ukraine found itself caught between two powerful forces, one pushing for integration with the West and the other seeking closer ties with Russia. Tensions escalated when, in April 2009, Ukraine's former Prime Minister Yulia Tymoshenko aligned herself with the Orange Revolution movement, which advocated for closer ties with the EU. This shift in Ukrainian politics triggered a strong reaction from Moscow, which saw any movement away from its sphere of influence as a potential loss of its strategic buffer zone against the West. As the years passed, Ukraine's stance on NATO membership became more pronounced. In 2014, following the Russian annexation of Crimea and the ongoing war in Donbass, Ukraine's parliament voted to abolish its non-aligned status. However, actual membership remained elusive, complicated by internal political divisions and external pressures. Despite Ukraine's efforts, Russia's opposition to its NATO aspirations remained steadfast, and the possibility of Ukrainian accession seemed increasingly remote. As the standoff over NATO membership persisted, there were sporadic outbreaks of violence in eastern Ukraine. Clashes between Ukrainian forces and Russian-backed separatists continued to claim lives and caused significant damage to infrastructure. The conflict had become a persistent sore point in relations between Ukraine and Russia. With each passing year, the divide between the two nations seemed to grow wider. By late 2021, satellite imagery revealed a massive buildup of Russian troops near Ukraine's borders. Western intelligence agencies sounded the alarm, suggesting a possible imminent invasion. Diplomatic efforts to ease tensions failed to yield substantial results, and speculations about an impending conflict reached fever pitch. On February 2022, in a pivotal address to the nation, Russian President Vladimir Putin acknowledged the historical significance of the upcoming date, alluding to the potential for a renewed conflict. He stated, "We know how it all ended, 100 years ago. A century of humiliation has come to an end, and now we are moving forward together toward our common goal, the restoration of our country." His words echoed with historical weight, hinting at a looming event that could redefine modern history. 2 days later, on February 22, 2022, the Russian State Duma, the lower house of its parliament, voted to allow the deployment of Russian troops on the territory of friendly nations at their request. This legislative step appeared to pave the way for a potential intervention in Ukraine. Then, on February 24, 2022, the world woke up to the reality of a full-scale invasion. Explosions rattled the skies above Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Mariupol. Russian tanks and troops surged across the border, marking a decisive break with the post-Cold War era and underscoring Russia's determination to reshape the regional balance of power. In the early stages of the war, it seemed as if Russia's military might would quickly overwhelm Ukraine's defenses. Russian troops advanced rapidly toward major cities such as Kharkiv and Mariupol, while also launching airstrikes on key targets across the country. However, despite the odds stacked against them, the Ukrainian armed forces put up a fierce resistance. This unexpected resilience slowed down Russia's advance, giving Ukrainian civilians time to organize and mount a defense. As the war dragged on, it became clear that Russia's initial plans were not unfolding as expected. The Ukrainian military, aided by intelligence and logistical support from NATO countries, launched a series of successful counteroffensives. Cities like Kharkiv were recaptured, demonstrating the Ukrainian spirit and capability to withstand the Russian onslaught. In the face of mounting casualties and international condemnation, Russia adjusted its strategy, pulling back its troops from certain areas and focusing its efforts on the eastern part of the country. They officially recognized the independence of two breakaway regions, Donetsk and Luhansk, effectively transforming the conflict into a war between two sovereign states. And here's where we ask you to pause for a moment, to reflect on the journey thus far, to consider the profound implications of the decisions made and actions taken that led them to this pivotal moment. As 2023 unfolded, Ukraine launched a long-awaited counteroffensive, marking a significant escalation in its strategy to reclaim lost territory. But the progress wasn't as swift as anticipated. Russia had transformed Ukraine's southern front line into a formidable fortress. Miles of anti-tank ditches, trenches, and minefields hindered Ukraine's advance. In the face of these challenges, Ukraine employed innovative tactics, drawing Russian forces into exposed areas before delivering a surprise attack. Yet even with these strategies, the cost of every mile gained was substantial. In contrast, Russia's approach was rooted in defensive measures. With a reduced troop presence along the front line, they aimed to inflict heavy losses on Ukrainian forces. As the offensive intensified, casualties on both sides mounted, leaving many questioning the true cost of victory. Amid the ongoing military operations, Russia intensified its attacks on civilian infrastructure in Ukraine, particularly targeting the energy sector. Throughout the winter months, Ukrainian cities endured almost daily missile strikes. This tactic aimed to not only cause physical damage, but also to demoralize the civilian population by depriving them of essential services, like electricity and heating. The relentless attacks raised concerns about the escalating severity of the conflict and its broader implications. For regional stability, as the war entered its third year, the global impact of the conflict continued to reverberate. In response to the aggression, NATO and the European Union imposed unprecedented sanctions on Russia, including economic sanctions and the isolation of Russia on the global stage. The United States, the European Union, NATO, and other countries provided billions of dollars in military and financial aid to Ukraine to assist in its defense. the war had clearly transcended a regional conflict, evolving into a broader geopolitical struggle. In the global arena, Russia's ties with countries like China and Iran grew stronger. As it sought alternative alliances and sources of support, food prices rose worldwide due to disruptions in the supply of essential commodities from Ukraine and Russia. Millions of Ukrainians were internally displaced or had to flee their country as refugees, seeking asylum in neighboring nations. Now, let's fast forward to 2025. As of today, the front lines have shifted little since late 2022. Both nations are locked in what some are calling a war of attrition, where the ability to endure and deplete the enemy's resources is paramount. Ukraine's counteroffensive, while unsuccessful in achieving a breakthrough, has forced Russia to remain on the defensive. This has prevented Russia from achieving its initial goals of overthrowing the government in Kyiv, and has resulted in heavy casualties on both sides. Despite the ongoing hostilities, diplomatic efforts continue, albeit without any significant progress, toward a peaceful resolution. Talks between Ukraine and Russia have been sporadic and often deadlocked. International mediation efforts have also faced challenges as the conflict has become increasingly polarized. As of now, the war shows no signs of abating, leaving the international community to grapple with the implications of a prolonged conflict in one of Europe's most pivotal regions. When Russia invaded Ukraine, it was said to be a war that would be over in a few days. But 6 years later, it continues to rage, causing immense suffering and reshaping global politics. Some wars are measured in months or years, but this one is measured in the lives it has changed forever. So what do you think? Does Ukraine have what it takes to win this war? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to be a part of our journey.